Call. Two men. One named Rich. That's me.
This is Jermaine. Just got off the toilet.
He's a foul man. This is the X's and O's of life.
Huh?
Yeah, so that's who we are. We're weird people, and I'm okay with it. So, my name is Rich, and this is the X's and O's interview edition deal. I really need to put this into a different place. I don't know. It feels weird, but I have Amy with me, and yeah, it's a lady, and another interview from the pod match, space, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to go ahead and do a brief little intro. So she is a mama bear. There you go. She also is super into sports, which we're definitely going to delve into because happy football day to all that celebrate. And I don't really want to tell her story because I don't know her story. So I'm going to let her tell you her story. So, Amy, tell us things and stuff.
Well, good morning.
Hello.
Happy football day.
Indeed. I acknowledge this.
Who's your team?
I'm a Steeler fan, but I'm a fantasy football guy.
Okay.
So that's kind of, yeah, I'm more into fantasy than the hometown, which sounds bad, but that's what fantasy does.
Yep. Who's your best player on your team that you're most excited about?
Oh, geez. So I drafted Eckler first.
Okay.
I had first of all, my league is a whole box of weird. I start 2 quarterbacks. I start 5 wide receivers, 3 running backs, 3 flex, and a tight end. I don't do kickers and defenses because I'm not a child. Yeah. So I drafted Eckler first. Didn't really want to. I wanted to do the Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown stack, but didn't really work out. But I ended up getting AJ Brown, which kind of kicked me in the soul a little bit because I really kind of wanted to do the stack, but I was like, well, whatever. So I don't know. I'm more who am I scared of? And that's everybody else.
Well, it's funny because I have a league and it's all my girlfriends. And
wow.
And we're the antithesis of you, and we're the antithesis of my brother who I work with, where he has an auction tonight where you have $500 to spend, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Come, and if you end up auto drafting because life is happening, you auto draft.
Yeah, we had a few of those. Infuriating.
You end up getting right. The best players end up getting picked in order, but in all fairness, it's an excuse to watch football. Excuse to for somebody else different, and it gets people into the game. That's kind of like what we do at last night's game, where I just want you to enjoy the game. I think sports is so much, people talk in, you think people talk in stats about sports, right? We're not talking, but you and I did not just sit here and talk about how many yards Patrick Mahomes threw last year. We're talking about the idea of playing fantasy football, and you could probably go down a downward spiral on all these athletes that I probably don't know that much about when it really comes down to it. And so, part of what it comes down to last night's game is we help people talk about sports, especially if you don't know anything about sports. And I think that's the most important part, is to remember that sports is a tool in your tool belt of success. You don't have to be a sideline reporter. You can absolutely be someone who knows just enough, and that still gives you an opportunity to have a foray into a conversation with someone else. And so that's kind of what we do. And that's what makes it fun over here at last night's game. And I guess I should say the reason we started last night's game was because I had a girlfriend who's at a baseball game with me. I worked for the Arizona Diamondbacks for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And she said, "Why are the guys running off the field?" And I said, "Well, they have 3 outs." And she said, "What's an out?" And so I realized that she worked in these big manufacturing jobs with a bunch of guys. And I felt like she was lacking that little nugget of knowledge to understand that the Super Bowl was coming up. And here's 2 nuggets about the Super Bowl. And so that's kind of where last night's game came from. It took us about 14 years from that sort of conceptual idea to actually putting it to use. But here we are.
And you know what? That's super cool because I feel like you're absolutely right because you just delve in and you're sitting here. Are you in Arizona right now?
No.
No. Okay.
Yep.
So just to say an Arizona player, so you're sitting here talking, around the lunch table about Zach Allen's ERA and, his Ks per nine. And you got somebody else that's like, what's an era?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, you do the face palm, but then you also realize, wait, you don't know what any of that means, so you can't even participate. Like, for example, my kid, this is his first year in fantasy, and I'm like, well, you picked a bad league to probably jump in 2 feet first, but all right, well, trial by fire,
right?
And I bought him Football for Dummies and things like that, and he's read that, and it's like, yeah, I have all this knowledge, but what am I doing with it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and like when it comes to fantasy, so much of it it's like gambling. It's luck, right? You're betting on someone staying healthy. You're betting on someone having a good year. All those things are so important, but it's also you can and I feel this way about March Madness brackets. You could research the heck out of them,
right.
And there's a reason there's never a perfect bracket because life happens, the world happens. And so it never works out. The best I've ever done in brackets was when I was like, I got to pick this team. I've got to pick my bracket in 3 minutes before these games start. I hit, autofill, save, and like, there we have it.
Oh, wow. Really? That's funny.
Because I purely just hit the button. I mean, it really is. It's kind of funny how that works. And, you can know so much about sports. And I work alongside my brother, who's my co-founder, and he has all that knowledge about sports, which is why I know about sports because he always teaches me. But I do think that so much about sports is truly luck when it comes down to it, especially the betting on sports and all those other things. I mean,
Right.
the knowledge helps, but it is a lot of fun. And that's why I encourage people to participate in the fantasy football and participate in March Madness brackets because in the end of the day, you're participating, you're learning. I find that sports is such a participatory sport where you and I were talking about, baseball and you said something about ERA, I'd be like, what's an era? You would probably likely explain that to me. And I find that is the case across the board when it comes to sports. If you said, hey, who's your favorite team? It's the Steelers. Who's the Steelers quarterback this year? I don't even know. I mean, you can have those conversations, right? I mean, that's the way we can talk
Right.
about sports where if I'm someone who doesn't know that much about it, there's nothing wrong with that because I probably know a lot about other things that maybe you don't, and we can, vibe that way. But it's just one of those things that I think people get so intimidated by it.
But it's also like a drug. Because once you get in there, it is legitimately like the mafia. Like there's just no, like I had somebody drop out this year because they were kind of like, look, this gives me so much, and it makes my day so bad that I just need a year off to like recoup. And I'm like, yeah, fair. I get that because I've said many bad words and hit many bad things because seemingly every week, there is somebody that has a career day against me.
Yep.
I get it.
Yep.
So what really drove you towards, because look, let's elephant in the room, obviously lady in sports are like, oh, they're allowed to vote too. It's one of those weird things. And, you do see a lot more, female representation in the sports world, and cool. I don't care if you're lady, fella, white, black, purple. It doesn't matter. If you know what you're yapping about, you know what you're yapping about. It shouldn't matter, but it matters, and you know that. And that sucks. So what difficulties have you had kind of being in that quote unquote boys club? Because that's got to be like rough sledding, and it sucks. It has to be, but it's yay. We're still progressive / we're in the 1920s still.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely challenges, and I would say there are a lot of challenges that are no different than what women encounter in a workplace across the board. I do think that's a huge piece of it. It's just there are challenges of, especially now being a parent and being the primary parent at home. Um, it's sometimes there's days where I'm the one who has to go pick up a sick kid, or there's no school today. So guess what? Guess who has to sacrifice and change things around? And so there are those. I find that the world, especially post COVID, is a lot more understanding of those things, because I
Good
think they
point.
learned that people got used to there's a kid on your lap while you're on a conference call, because guess what? You have no choice and they have nowhere else to go and you have nowhere else to go because you're all in the same house. So I do think there's some respect when it comes to that. I did read this morning that that the gap between men in the workforce and women in the workforce, I think 68% of men and 57% of women are in the workforce. So we're seeing that more prevalent, and we're seeing, I think that is a huge push. I think that continues to make people learn more and pay attention. But I do think there are the challenges that exist for every woman in the workplace, and we push forward and we look to people. And I'm blanking. Why am I blanking on Holly's last name? Different sports announcers, different folks who are leading the helm. Hannah Storm, that we've seen really grow in sports, and we've seen them grow up through sports. And those are our idols. Those are the people who are working hard, who are trying to make things happen. Billie Jean King, you look at tennis and what she's done for not just tennis, but for sports. And so, it's how do we learn from them? How do we turn around and pick those up behind us and help them up too? And I think that's females in the workforce in general. But I do think that that's even more necessary in the world of sports, because
Yeah.
they're just fewer present.
Yeah, and I think there is an unconscious bias, unfortunately, just from just society, that it's like, oh, this is man stuff. You don't know anything about that. So I'll tell you this. I am barely a dude in the sense of like being able to do the normal man stuff. Oh yeah, no. The wife is like, hold my beer. I'm like, okay, you go fix the stuff. I'll go cuddle with puppy.
You're like my
So
house, where people go to talk to my husband about sports, and he's like, "You're talking to the wrong person in this household." I have no idea to talk to her.
so at least in that sense, she is absolutely in that stereotype of like, ooh, Disney and Taylor Swift, and that's literally her life. But like when it comes to building stuff, the prototypical dude stuff, oh yeah, no. I build a shed and I'm like, this is probably how it should look. It's functional.
It's a Pinterest fails. We call those around here the Pinterest fails.
Oh, that was my attack on raccoons getting the trash cans. So I had to buy like this $180 literal like 2 boxes full of metal things and screws. I'm like, all right, it's supposed to look like a shed, and more like looks like a dumpster, but it shuts and they don't get in there. So I'm like, okay, I probably could have spent like a quarter of this and built this myself, but I am an idiot and don't know how to Home Depot. So Amazon, here I come.
There you go.
But no, you're absolutely right, and it's I didn't mean for it to be the elephant in the room, but look, it is what it is. Like, this is not a podcast where we kind of dance around that. It's like, hey, you're a lady and you're in sports. What? It just is. That's what it is.
Sure.
So have it in, I guess, in line with that, have you ever had an experience in, the sports realm where you were just absolutely just like, did you just say that to me? Like there has to be that, because guys generally suck. Let's be honest.
Oh, for sure. I mean, those stories exist, and there are plenty. But it's one of those where I was just growing up with a brother. Like, I'm so used to boys in general, and you just kind of learn how to brush it off and move on. And
Yeah.
so there's definitely, I mean, those things definitely exist, but you brush it off, or you have enough clout to say, screw you, I'm moving, and like move on with your life. And so it's but it comes with a vote of confidence, right? It takes a lot to get to that point, right? It takes a lot of confidence to tell somebody to F off and move on.
Well,
And
at that point, you're just like, you rattle off some stats, kick them in the dick, and walk away.
But it does. It takes that confidence to, instead of just sit there and take it, or sit there and be run over, if you will.
You can say whatever you want to on this podcast.
Right. Well, thank you.
By the way.
I'm trying to think of how to get toward that. But it's like it takes a lot of confidence to do that, and that's not something that I had as much as a younger person working in the work world. As I've gotten older, obviously you continue to learn to stand up for yourself, and those are the things that I continue. Like, for me, it's really important to mentor and work with people who are younger than me, coming up through their careers, and teach them some of those things. I've done some teaching in the university level. It's important for me to teach them really some of the life skills, I think, that are more important than just what comes out of a book, because that is half the battle, if not more, really, when it comes down to it. If you work hard and you can stand up for yourself, I think that's so important. And so that's just something I always try to pass along to my students, especially that's important to them. And it's important to be progressive and move on in your career and move up.
Well, here's what we're going to do. I could care less that you're a lady. You're a person. That's really, like, I'm talking to a human, and that's really kind of what this should be. And I kind of wanted to do this certain way because I think, unfortunately, there's still going to be people. There are going to be people that are going to listen to this. It's like, what's this broad talking about sports for? And it's like, you mean that human talking about sports? Like, it shouldn't matter, and it doesn't matter. But that's why I wanted to lead in with that, because I don't really care about that part. Like, it's cool, good, but it shouldn't matter. And I think that's kind of the direction you're trying to get to, where it's like, you don't have to look at me any type of way. I'm just, I know my stuff and things and stuff. And
sure. And I would say a portion of our readers and our listeners are men, because they don't know a lot about sports, or they don't care about sports. It's really what it comes down to. And I think that's what I think we really try to put an exclamation point on, is knowing about sports is great, but it doesn't make you, this is not sports for dummies. That is not at all, because people know what they know. They like what they like. And the beautiful thing about sports is it's a fantastic way to start a conversation with someone and then move on to something, because sports easily ties into food and into travel. And
it's a gateway drug.
That's exactly it. It's a gateway drug. And so that's the way we look at sports. Is this is just another way for you to be successful, for you to complete that sales call, to make that connection, whatever that might be. And
my God, yeah, absolutely. People get very, very excited. I was going to say a different word, but I don't know what your listeners are really kind of expecting verbiage wise, so I'll hold my tongue. People get very excited over those things, and if you are like, "Oh, they said my team, they said the person's name," it's like a dopamine release. It is such a strange thing, but
community, right? Like, you feel like you're part of it. Yeah.
It's like a weird cult, except without Kool-Aid and suicide. It's nice.
I mean, it's true.
So what's your coolest story here from your experience over, the multitude of years you've done? Like, it could be anything from, I met this athlete, to, self-realization, just anything. Like, what, if this has to be on your tombstone, what are you putting?
Oh gosh, there's so many great stories. I guess I could tell you, maybe I'll tell you a baseball story, and then I'll tell you last night's game story. So one of the coolest things that I got to do when I worked for the Diamondbacks is I was in charge of, we did community relations. So anytime you saw a player out in the community, that was us. And
nice.
So I ended up having the Make-A-Wish account. So anytime a kiddo, Make-A-Wish kiddo had a wish, we would take care of fulfilling that.
I love you for that, by the way. It's beautiful.
It was so cool. And so we had one family, Matthew was his name, I can still remember him. He wanted to meet Randy Johnson.
Oh, I have a big unit jersey upstairs. I should have wore it.
Great man. And so
this also might make me cry. So just
it might. And so we brought Matthew in, and instead of just doing the normal handshake, because there are guys who just handshake, nice to meet you.
Right. The token little.
Here's the ball type of thing. And they're still meeting their heroes. So, put that where everyone has their own comfort level. And so instead of that, Randy was like, all right, buddy, let's go. Took him in the clubhouse. They went and got ice cream. They sat in his chair. Like they did all the things that are really cool about being a baseball player, right? All the cool things that you get to do. Took him on the field. And it was just one of those, like we had we did a video segment for our internal channel. And it was just, I remember watching it and just this joy on this little boy's face was so cool. And it was so neat to see this guy who was so intimidating, so huge.
Yeah.
Like pick this kid up and like hang out with him. It was such a cool thing. And that I remained connected that he passed away. But I remained connected with the dad for quite a while. And they ended up having twins after he passed away. And so it was very cool to see just the joy that something that sounds so simple, a meeting your hero brought to someone. And so that was really cool. And I mean, it was just the impact of the different families that we had a chance to meet and the impact of throughout, whether it was an educational program, whatever that might be, these athletes have realized if I put my name on something, kids might read. And how cool is that? So when you really think about the capacity of what these athletes, these men and women athletes are doing and the impact they're having, it's monumental. It's just such a cool thing to think about that really truly they are average humans though. I mean, yes, they have this great talent, but they're moms, their dads, their brothers, their children. And so when you look at that, they're still just a human, just like you and I talked about earlier, like just a human. They happen to have this amazing talent, right? Whatever that might be, someone saw that in them, honed in on that and fine-tuned that amazing talent. But really when it comes down to it, LeBron James is still a dad.
Right.
He's still a son. And so those things are still there. And the thing about being an athlete that, people don't always think about, there are a lot of perks, but it's things like you have a family wedding, you have a child who's sick, you have a child who graduates from high school, you're not going.
Right.
Those are things you're on the road, you're in a game, you're not going. So obviously they have bereavement and all those other things now and paternity leave, and maternity leave. But it's just one of those things to think about that, well, yes, it's a great job and it's amazing and they make a lot of money and they have all this stardom. There are challenges to it, right?
Yes. And I think people forget that a lot.
Yeah. Hey, Rich, leave your house. It's time for you to move somewhere else. Your kids and your family are going to have to figure it out. So
yeah,
get up and go.
Oh, they're friends? Oh, well, sorry about your luck, bub.
Yep.
Go buy new ones.
Yep.
And really quick, just so for anyone that doesn't know, Randy Johnson is 6'10". All right. Giant left-handed pitcher that played, I don't even know how many years, probably around 15-ish, somewhere right around there. It's a gigantic man, henceforth his name, the Big Unit. So when you said intimidating, it's like, yeah, a little bit more than most, though, I would say, just because it's like, oh, you are a tree. Yeah. But that's super cool because he always seemed very, very, he didn't talk. He had his like creepy little mustache deal, which was always weird, his little mullet. But very soft spoken, didn't really ever hear him talk. So to hear, and I learned that from you, to hear that he had such such warm heart. That's beautiful. And that's what you don't see. And you're absolutely right. People don't see birthdays, graduations. That's why a lot of these athletes grow up, and their kids are like, dude, fuck my dad. I don't care about that guy. Like, I don't even know who he is. Like, my dad was, I don't know, the mailman. I don't know. Not to say mom was banging the mailman, but you know what I mean? Like, I saw him more than I saw my dad, So I think that I don't think that translates into as much money as they should get, but that's a story for a different day. But yeah,
there's pluses and minuses to every path we take in life, whatever that might be, right?
Mm-hmm. So what about your other story? I'm curious to hear the business story.
I would say, and I didn't actually, I was trying to think, I probably could come up with one specifically, but what I really think is interesting, and what I love, the stories that I love that I hear all the time is if people who come up to me or send me notes and say, hey, I was able to dive into a conversation at work. We have one specifically that I always remember. It was a friend's now ex-girlfriend. And she said, I've been reading your stuff. And she said, sat in the cube land. And she said, the other day, I stood up and chimed in about Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
And she was like so proud of herself. And she said the guys looked at her like she had 3 heads because she was all of a sudden like, hey, yeah, that game last night, the Steelers, XYZ. And she was like, okay. And then she just like sat back down. And I love, to me, that is that vote of confidence, that one other thing that you can have that you can say, look, I've got this. And could she have carried on the conversation to say, let's go get Philly cheesesteaks for lunch? Could we have taken that a million different ways? Yes, we could have. And so I think it's really neat to see that, the excitement. And I mean, I've had so many stories like that. A friend who's
You're bridging the gap, it sounds like, which is, you're bridging the gap and parlaying that into communication, which is parlaying that into relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly
beautiful.
it. That's exactly it. It's because so much about it is just figuring out that commonality, right? That's how we make friends. That's how we make contacts. And if you can sort of make that commonality, and maybe it's not sports, but that's your foray into it, then you realize, hey, we have these 18 other things in common, right? And that just happens to be the thing we started with.
And it's interesting because post COVID, I thought we would have been a lot more people with people, but we have become not that. We're kind of back to pre-COVID to being cantankerous and like, why are you looking at me? I didn't mean to. Why are you looking? Why aren't we? Don't talk to me. What? Because that's how people are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if it's whether it's a fear thing or a social anxiety thing, but you are absolutely right. Sports, man, woman, black, white, orange, doesn't matter. If you don't even like sports, you have heard something on the news, a news blurb about the home team, about, some XYZ player, that it can absolutely be your in on a conversation.
Absolutely. Or if you're into pop culture and you're reading people.com, you're seeing, Alex Rodriguez dating everyone. It was always a great conversation starter.
Yeah.
Because
he's a pretty man. I'm not going to lie. He's a pretty fella.
Like, at least it gave us all something to get excited about. And so
right.
whatever you're watching and whatever you're reading, and I always say that's like things when you buy a yellow car, right? All of a sudden you're seeing yellow cars everywhere. So once you start to pay a little bit of attention to it, you start to see it everywhere, whether that's your, the Today Show, whether that's your evening news, whether you're at lunch with some friends. It continues to proliferate your life if you're kind of paying attention for it.
Damn, I'm learning more than I probably should from this podcast. No, that's so cool. Because you don't think that. It's one of those unconscious things, but you don't, like you said today, the Today Show. Who's one of these hosts on the Today Show? Michael Strahan. You very well may have people just watching that to kind of hear, his goofball self going off. Huh.
Yeah, you look at how sports is just really, like I said, he was on Kelly and Michael, and he really
he did that too.
He's taken his sports career from where he could have probably gone into broadcasting and all of those things in the sports era. He's taken that a whole different way. I believe he has a men's suit line. Like, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you watch how he's infiltrated the pop culture world, and just by, being himself and going out there and doing what he does.
Yeah. He's a bit of a charismatic fella.
Right. That helps for morning TV.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So last night's game, what is this? How does it look? What do you bring to the table? Like, what if you had to put that into a box? If there was a tombstone for last night's game, what would it say? That may be my new thing, by the way. I may have adopted that.
I like this. It's better than 3 words to describe yourself.
Yeah.
So last night's game purely exists to empower the sports curious. We exist to help those who don't know a lot about sports join the conversation, and we do that through a tri-weekly podcast as well as a weekly newsletter. So every Monday and Friday, we have a very short, about 2-minute podcast that gets you wrapped up from the weekend and ready for the weekend. And then on Wednesdays, we have a longer format where my brother and I do that together, and we talk through something happening in the world of sports. I'm really excited. We just did an episode.
I was just gonna ask you, what was your last episode?
We just did NFL is out yesterday for the NFL season, sort of a preview of the season. And it's things where we talk about how obviously some of the key pieces of who's predicted to win the Super Bowl, but also things like the fact that the owners voted to allow players to wear the number 0 now. And so things like that, where you're finding these little nuggets that are fun conversation pieces. But I'm very excited. We did one, it'll be out next week. And it was inspired by the show Quarterback on Netflix. And it's play calling. What does play calling look like in football? And having never played football and never really understanding a lot of the ins and outs.
I always think of Peyton Manning in Omaha.
So I asked about that. And so I said to my brother, I'm calling an audible tonight. Today's podcast topic, the recording we're talking about. And I don't want to know anything. Like, give me a few keywords. I want to know nothing because I already don't know a lot. So I'm just going to ask the questions. And it was so fascinating to me because he has such a great insight. And so even for people who know or have played football, there's some really fascinating little nuggets in there that I loved, that I really truly think it's one of those monumental things where you listen to it and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Like little mind blown emoji of
right.
So giving you appreciation for the strategy that happens on a field. And we all know Omaha from Peyton Manning and obviously Omaha Productions, and he's just gone down the wheelhouse with that, gone down the well with that. But Omaha was an indicator word. He is since indicated. But I mean, there's one interview, if you ever get a chance to watch it, and we did the same thing on the podcast, where the reporters are kind of giving to a little bit of a hard time. And he's like, okay, let's see if you can call this play. And so he spouts off about probably 15 words that obviously make no sense, right? North tree, garbage can, like, I don't know. They were all these words. And said, okay, now repeat that back to me. And no one could repeat the whole thing back. And so to me, it gave me such an appreciation of, we're not hearing it, we're not seeing it, especially in the NFL. XFL, you can hear them call the plays and things like that, but you're not. It just gives you such an appreciation for what's happening on the field that you really had no idea. And how them doing this, looking at a play, is.
The wife asked me about that, and I was like, that's where they kind of have their plays at. That's kind of how they,
Right. But it's also like you look at them going, the things they have to remember from here to out the mouth, and everyone else has to then process it. And so it was such a fun episode for me, and the one that came from a reader feedback. And so that was just really fun to be able to put that one together. So that's I think the one I've been most excited about maybe ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? Because it's because you were like, I'm kind of an audience member as a host here right now. So
that's exactly it. I was like, wait, cool. I'm sorry. Tell me more about this. I don't understand. So
you look at the timestamp, you're like, oh Jesus, we're at 3 hours. I gotta get the hell out of here.
I was like, we're getting close to that 20. We typically do about 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
We gotta reboot. We gotta pull this. But I was like, I could be here for days. It was just so interesting.
Yeah, we actually I do 3 podcasts.
Oh, wow.
I do one with my host that you saw. I do one with the wife, and then I do another one with that host, but it's a football one.
Oh, cool.
And so we just had our episode about the our fantasy football draft, and we kind of have a whole format where we do it. We're going to do it on Tuesdays, and that's going to be recapping Mondays and talking about waiver wire stuff on fantasy and previewing Thursday, and then Saturday is when we review Thursday and look forward towards anything else that's happening on Sunday. Yeah, I'm a bit of a crazy person. I probably record about 6 times a week.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
For no less than an hour.
And I think people don't understand what goes into the recording is part of it, but then you have to edit, you have to pull together audio clips, like all those things. It's kind of like social media, right? When people are like, I make 17 TikTok videos a day. And you're like, how do you have time to do anything else? Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. But if it's a passion that doesn't really feel like work, that's the cool thing.
Right. Absolutely. It's fun, but it's definitely a lot of work. It's not as easy as it appears.
I mean, it's easy for me because I'm brilliant, but it's fine.
Well, besides that, yeah, maybe, I could up an IQ pointer to here or to there.
Duh. So what's your sport of choice? Like, what do you?
This is a good question.
Yeah.
It's been interesting. It normally would be probably football because I do enjoy baseball, or football. Sorry, my son's getting into it. He's little. My husband loves it, so typically it's always on in the background. But recently, not recently, in the past probably 4 or 5 years, I've gotten into hockey because I'm from Las Vegas,
Atta girl.
and we have the Golden Knights. And so
Okay.
that's been a lot of fun because in Phoenix, I had a friend who worked for the Coyotes, so we spent some time at Coyotes games, but never really dove into the sport of hockey. And so it's been fun to watch my parents learn it and everyone get excited about it. We were able to, when they went to the Stanley Cup last year, I said to my brother, I'm like, okay, hey, we're going to roll the dice. I can make it to you for game 5. We may not need it. We may not get the right game, but like the tickets are cheaper now. Let's buy them right now. And this is the only day I can get there. And so it took my son and my parents and my brother, and we all went to the game. We sat like 4 rows from the top, and we were there for game 5 when they won the Stanley Cup. And that was very, very cool. So
I was gonna say, how's that like not like top one of the cool things you experienced? My goodness.
that's not a career thing, but as a fan, that was just. And it's funny though, because I think when you watch it on TV, you get the stories, you get a little more almost emotional because you're getting that sort of feedback, right? You're learning from the broadcasters, you're getting sort of the, Rich is out there and it's his 850th game and he's never won a Stanley Cup, and his son who is born is here. Like, you're getting all that story, right?
Right.
Whereas when you're in the stands, it's just insanity. It was just, and my son is 4. And so he was like, what the heck is going on? People are throwing flamingos every time, like blown up inflatable flamingos every time they score.
I love how you had to make sure, like, PETA, we're not throwing legit.
No one brought live flamingos. But it's kind of like the Panthers, where they throw the plastic rats on the field.
Yeah.
On the ice. And so apparently Vegas has adopted flamingos. And so, people are throwing flamingos. It's loud. It's crazy. And they had scored so many goals in that game 5 that it was just like, you're having such a great time. And at one point,
right.
Says, I'm kind of tired. Can I go home? And I was like, absolutely not a chance. Take a nap in that chair. It's not.
Yeah.
Did you want some ice cream? I mean,
right. That's where you're like, okay, go play in traffic.
It's just one of those. Like, do we need snacks? What do we need? You want red Gatorade? Whatever you need, buddy. Like, let's just keep it together. We got to stay here. Sorry, bud. There's no choice.
Yeah, that's yikes.
Yeah.
Oh God, I would probably choke a kid for that. Absolutely, just start choking him.
But he's little, and he was on the wrong time zone, so it's like, you know what?
Oh yeah,
have a good time. And if I have to hold you for half a quarter, then I will. If that's what makes it work, I will just be here and we'll do that.
Who's the most famous athlete you've kind of met?
Oh gosh.
And Randy don't count.
Okay, Randy doesn't count.
Mm-mm.
I would say most of the ones I've met were probably in baseball.
Okay.
Sammy Sosa.
All right. Sammy, when he was black or when he was white?
This was Sammy. So this was a long time ago.
Okay, so he was still black. All right.
I'm trying to think.
If anyone doesn't know what I'm looking at, when I'm talking about, go look up Sammy Sosa, like before and after picture. It is unnerving.
Disorder, and I know, poor guy.
Yeah, it is unnerving.
I would say, I don't know. You've taken my top one, I guess. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else who was just one of those notable. I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that, but I would say the typical, your Kurt Schillings or Randy Johnsons, Sammy Sosa, and we had a Make-A-Wish kid that came over with one of our players, who then I took over just to meet Sammy Sosa when the Cubs were in town.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that. I think that I'm sure there's probably somebody else really cool in there that I'm missing that's a football player. Oh, I met Wayne Gretzky. That was pretty cool.
Oh. I don't like Gretzky.
Well, that's right, but if you meet the greatest person in their sport, that's pretty impressive. So,
see, that's a tough call. I can't say he's the GOAT.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not now. You've got Sidney Crosby and a whole bunch of other players.
No, I'm going Super Mario there. I can't.
Okay, I respect that.
Yeah, Gretzky can kick rocks. So anyone and this is going to be hard. I don't want you to like put yourself into a box, so you can just say, "Nah, fella, move on." Anyone All right, how can I put this where it's like soft? Any athlete that you've met, you're just like, oh wow, you're a dick, huh? Don't that you can that you'd be okay with like name dropping.
I would say in my experience, no one has ever been rude
Okay,
or someone I might think that, but there are players that have a big personality on the court or on the field that in real life are much quieter. And so that's kind of one of those you sort of expect
that
that
makes sense.
persona to exude from at 24/7. And that is not necessarily always true. So I wouldn't say no one's ever been like rude or inappropriate, but I would say that I can think of off the top of my head. But I would say that just a different it's a different person that you meet sometimes outside off the field.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I'm sure people who has ever ran into anyone at a restaurant or whatever that might be, that they may say the same thing of they're just it's not that big persona, right? When if you ran into, I don't know, I'm trying to think of someone who's really
Well, why don't we use an example? Like, so to stray away from the rude part here. So the surprising switch over. Who would be the top of your list for that?
um
Also, can I just say the fact that I remember I was like, we're not going to do all these questions, and it became an absolute question fest.
that's all right. We're still chatting about all the things.
Yes.
I would say I don't know. That's a really good question. Who was the most surprising? I would
And
say
it could be good or bad. Like,
sure. I would
you
say
know,
going back to like Sammy Sosa, I was surprised how quiet he was.
really,
I felt like he would have been like a bigger personality, but he's just kind of quiet.
he does have that big goofy smile.
But
I
I
can
mean,
see
he's
it.
a nice human.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, he never struck me as, but yeah, that is a good point. He had that big, charismatic kind of persona about him. Yeah.
It was just kind of quiet and granted it was pregame and so maybe he was in his routine and all the things, but I would say that's the one that I remember being like, huh, I didn't expect that.
So, bringing up the whole Sosa thing, I've always kind of had conversations about this with people that actually care about the baseball stuff. I think steroids was a great thing for the game. I really, really do. And if anyone disagrees, tell me when baseball was at its kind of pinnacle from viewership and when people actually cared. Because now it's like, now that Otani is hurt, everyone's like, what's this game that's on every day? I'm all set.
It's really interesting. We've had a big conversation about that on our team about sort of baseball in general. And one of the things that has kind of come up is so you can share different, let's just say I pull a clip, I don't know, off of NFL's Twitter or whatever that might be. They're very loose with their social within reason, right? I mean, they realize that that viral clip that Rich recorded off the TV, if it goes viral, that's better for the sport. And you're
Right.
seeing some of that where I think baseball has really pulled back and said, it's all ours. We're going to protect it. And I think that's interesting because you're not getting those quirky viral moments as much. They're being produced by the league, not Rich who's letting something go viral because that really made him excited about it or made him laugh, whatever that might be, because chances are if you like it, someone else is going to like it, right? So we talk a little bit about that, but it's also it's administering the promotion of players, right? We talk about you had the steroid era, you had Barry Bonds, you had Mark McGuire, you had some of these guys who were such personalities,
Larger than life.
who were larger than life, but they, because of their, people love home runs. People love,
remember the tagline, chicks dig the long ball? There you go.
people love touchdowns. So those kinds of things, get people excited. And so it's been interesting to see how the league has just not seemed to pick up on some of those and really promoted it. And you look at things like golf, right? I mean, golf is a quiet sport. There's not a lot of touchdowns, for lack of a better, but it's like no one's scoring, no one's getting a hole in one every 5 minutes. Like that's just not a thing. It's a very slow paced game, but you're still having these personalities that people have made out of golf. And I mean, that's a Netflix deal. Those things all add up, right? I mean, we're watching Quarterback on Netflix, and no one would have paid attention to Kirk Cousins probably unless you're a Vikings fan until that show. And now he's on all of the NFL preseason sort of skits. He's all over the
because he has a personality.
Right. And so it's how do you take these players and make them a brand, take their personalities and make that a brand. And so it's interesting how you see other sports have done that. And this one they have not. I mean, even looking at F1, right? We lived in Singapore, so we learned to love F1 because there's a race in Asia.
Jesus.
I know, we were all over the place. And so we learned to love F1 because there was a race in Singapore. But we came back to the US and nobody talked about F1. Nobody watched F1.
Right.
And then you had Drive to Survive that came out. And all of a sudden you had F1 fans everywhere. It's become this hype, right? We're pulling in races in Miami. We have Vegas. We have Austin. And so it's a whole sport that you watch how a show as simple, quote unquote, simple as that is, has really, if produced well and done well, is giving everybody a personality, is giving everyone a behind the scenes exposure to the world of that sport. And so that's what it takes nowadays. There's so many draws on our attention that it takes somebody being a personality in order to make it work. And you have to really dive into those players to make it work. And so that, I think, is such a critical piece of that.
Yeah, you remember, I mean, God, you remember, like, this is Sports Center commercials, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would just have the faces of the game or the subsidiary faces of the game and thing. Like, one of my favorite baseball players in the current, atmosphere is Tatis and Tim Anderson. Now, Tim Anderson's got his ass kicked, so that's unfortunate. But that was like probably the most entertaining clip that MLB has kind of put out there, is him getting his bell rung, which is sad, but it's also like, do you not see how this is a problem? Like that's probably one of the bigger hits that you've gotten all year, on your viral kind of community.
Yeah. What I find so interesting too about baseball is every child has probably played it.
Yeah, right? I did. Yeah.
Every child, almost every boy in the world has probably played T-ball. Not in the world, but in the US has probably played T-ball.
Well, no, I think you're probably closer with the world because,
Yeah, that's true. There's actually, but it's also one of those, like, you really look at it, you think that it's such a familiar sport.
Right.
It's slower pace, so it's easier to understand. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. I think there's a lot of people doing great things. I think what Ohtani has done for the sport is phenomenal.
Literally the face of the game.
It's phenomenal what he's done, and if he could just stay healthy, and that's part of the challenge too of tying yourself to specific athletes, right? If Ohtani's on a Sports Center commercial in an Angels jersey and he gets traded, there goes your commercial. So it's always interesting on how you navigate this fine line of promoting, but also protecting at the same time. It's like dating, right? You're like, I'm here for it, but I also don't want to get hurt. So it's always that fine line of how does that work? And you have those superstars, and depending on who they are, they may not be comfortable with that superstar status either. So you really do have to be mindful of what their comfort level is, what someone's comfort level is being in front of a camera. Kevin Durant is someone who's quiet and is not but give him a Twitter account and he's great and he's off. And so, but it's one of those where he's maybe not as comfortable in front of a camera, maybe not in front of a group, but you sort of find what works for them and have to fine tune that. And that's giving a chance to get to know your players and really diving in on who goes where.
Oh man. Because it sucks. Because I'm looking at the time. I'm like, damn it to hell. Like, I knew this was going to be a cool, fun interview. At least for me. It probably is terrible for you, but I get it. It's fine.
Thank you.
Most ladies usually tell me when I'm around things are terrible. It's okay. Ha ha ha. I made a sex joke. It's fine. Oh man. I have so many ideas and questions and comments and I wish you were bad at this. That would be so much easier.
Well, thank you.
Just like, all right, I gotta go. I'm gonna go take a poop here, I guess. Toodles. So, because I don't know what your schedule looks like and what have you, so I don't want to like run you down or anything. If I don't want to just go into like, hey, plug your stuff, but what is yeah, we'll end on this, then we'll do the whole plug and all that. So if you could give a message to anyone that's listening that is like, I'm a little kind of nervous about the sports thing, I'm not too keen on it. I know, or maybe I'm just knee deep into one sport, but I kind of want to dip my toes into another one. Where do I start? And then part two of that is, what is, if once again, Tombstone, it is spooky season, it works.
It works.
What is the greatest thing you have learned from your journey?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll start with the
easy one first.
Yeah. So how do you dive in if you're looking into, I mean, obviously last night's game, where we do cover all the sports, we kind of cover the highlights of what's happening. But should you also need additional information? What I tell people a lot is, depending on what you're into, there's a people.com/sports, and it's all sports stories, but from a pop culture lens. So there's things like that if you look for them. Let's say you work with Rich, and Rich is a huge Steelers fan. Follow the Steelers on Instagram, because to me, that's some of the easiest ways to do that, or TikTok, because they're visual. You can still learn. You can learn if they won last night. You might learn a couple things here or there. You might see a great touchdown dance, but it's a visual thing. You're not really digging through stats for the most part. And so to me, that makes it much more achievable than a Twitter account or something else, because those tend to be a little stat heavy, a little text heavy, or not text heavy, but they're not quite as that easy visual that you might be intrigued by. So should that be your boss, whoever that might be, follow their favorite team. That is always very helpful. Should you want to learn a whole nother sport, I love, and we kind of already talked about it, I love these Netflix or these TV series, right? If you want to learn soccer, watch Ted Lasso. I hate to say it, but you can watch other things, but they talk about relegation. They talk about all those things. So you can learn about a little bit about the structure of European soccer. It gives you an appreciation for it. And I think those little forays into all of it are really interesting, right? If you want to learn hockey, dive in, watch a game, but watch it and I like to watch the home broadcast if you can, depending on what you're watching. But you're going to learn if you just pay attention, right? And there's a lot of 101s out there, but I go back to a YouTube video. I go back to, if I want to learn a sport, I go into the 101 version. I try not to dive into the intense version. We covered cricket. But I think last year, 2 years ago, we did a blog post on cricket, and a friend of ours who lives in Australia was like my reporter. And I was like, they give me the basics, right? I need to know there's a tea break. I need to know that it's basically a 3-day party. I need to know that there's a picnic. Like, I want to know, if I go to a game, what does that look like? So if you're trying to learn a sport, sometimes it's just starting at that level of, what does it look like if I go to a game? And live games are almost always better than in-person game, or excuse me, live games are almost better than TV games, because you get the whole feel of it. You may not know what's going on, and that's okay. I think that's totally okay. And if you get a chance to go with someone that you can ask questions to. My first NHL game, my first Golden Knights game, I should say, I went with my brother, and I just asked all the questions. Why is that guy? What's that? What's this? What's that? I mean, I knew the basics, obviously, but I didn't know a lot of these things. And so God bless him for being as patient as he is. He's like, okay, that guy's this is this. When this happens, this happens. And so don't be afraid to ask those questions too, of someone who's really into the sport, into the team. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. So it's kind of a long-winded answer of, there's a little bit of something for everybody.
That was beautiful.
Well, thank you. But it's just, I think it's just diving in and to not be intimidated, and know that it's okay if you don't know. That's okay.
So just nut up and ask.
Right. Just ask. That's what it comes down to. Just ask. And then what was my last question? I forgot.
Oh, so from your experience, from your 14, you said 14 years? No, that was 14 years ago.
Last night's game. Yeah.
Yes. From your whole experience, from, start to present, what is I don't know if the best thing you've learned, or, just kind of your epiphany, or just I don't really. I think I worded it really good initially. Then I forgot
You
how to
did.
do it
You did. You just reminded me of what it was.
because I'm bad at what I do.
You're not bad. 6 days a week. I would say the sort of the epiphany is, and I'm gonna look at it from maybe a career perspective, that the more you try to force things, the less they're going to work. And so for me, there's people who come out of school and go right into entrepreneurship. That was not my route. I went into the corporate world for 14-ish years, and that prepared me to be here. And that's my path, and that's worked for me. And it was hard to all of a sudden learn that when you're on your own, you're the attorney, you're the accountant, you're the IT department. And granted, you can contract all those things and have people help you, but those are all things that are really, I don't think people see. But also know that try not to, it was one of those things like try not to force it. If there's something you really want to do, dive in, learn about it, whatever that might be. If you want to be a podcaster, ask around, ask questions, but also don't force it. Things will happen when they need to happen. And so I would say that's the same for last night's game. In the beginning, we tried so hard to do X, Y, and Z, and stepping back and saying, wait a minute, what does our audience want? Let's listen. Let's put our ear to the ground and see what they want before we pitch what we think they need. And so that's been a continual evolution for us of listening and not forcing something down someone's throat. Let's listen and hear what they want to hear. And that's where that podcast episode about play calling came up, because that's something people are excited about and they're curious about. And so the more you can listen, the more you can take the feedback. And I see this a lot. I do a lot of work with business startups. And as a founder, you have to listen. And as a boss, as a leader, as a parent, whatever role you want to be in, you have to listen. And so put that feedback all to work, because if someone's willing to give you that feedback, it's something worth considering.
It's like a mic drop moment right there. Golly. No, and it's great because we're all over the place with how we do episodes. And one of our episodes, we definitely talked about opportunities kind of coming to you, and instead of kind of forcing the issue. And just to kind of circle back on this little thing, it's funny because the whole sports thing, when you were saying what you're saying, the first thing I thought of was, is baseball. A hitter is in a slump and he's forcing the issue, trying to pull the ball instead of, going with the ball and just rolling over that change up to third and ground out instead of just kind of going up the middle or going where the pitch is pitched.
That's in here, right? When it comes to that.
It's just so, because myself, I've learned so much on my journey doing this as well. I've talked to so many amazing people, and just something always seems to ring true. Like the majority of people I talk to, it's like, shut up and listen. Shut up and listen, because people will teach you. People will teach you unintentionally if you just listen. And I just think that's really cool with what you're doing, and getting people to talk about other stuff via sports. Like it, I don't know. That's just such a cool concept.
Person on something really interesting too. So I look at it, it's a full circle.
Well, I don't want to hold you up here, so let's get your plugs in here, and everyone knows kind of the scheme on what we do here. We get the plugs, we put them all in the description. I get it out within the day, all that fun jazz. But I am. Floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Well, I guess last night's game.com. We are on all social platforms that you can think of at Last Night's Game. And then I'm your Instagram person. So if you ever want to shoot me a note or DM me for something interesting, I'm the one who checks all of those things on Instagram. So my brother definitely has the Twitter account. And so you ever need something, that's where we are. You ever have feedback on all those things, we look at feedback as a gift. So yeah, would love to have you there. Obviously, podcast is called Sports Curious on all your favorite major platforms. And like I said, we're Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday and Friday are very short episodes, and they're also on YouTube too.
Well, I at least I will definitely be checking that out because I'm very curious to see. Well, sports curious. I've been a sports fan for as long as I've been a person. So I just appreciate you taking out the time. And I hate the whole exit part of it because I'm so bad at it because it's so awkward and weird. It's like you want to shake someone's hand, then you give them the pound, and it's like, okay, bye. But sincerely, I do appreciate you taking out the time here and rescheduling for me because the whole COVID thing. So hats off to you there. I appreciate you adjusting there because that was not fun.
Well, I'm glad you're better. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And please, everyone, check out Amy on all the things that she spouted off because this is an interesting person. It's not like the last guy I did. I don't even know who that was. That guy sucked. It actually may have been my co-host, so that's fine. But so I will let you run away from me screaming. That's fine. Thanks again, and yeah. So toodaloo there, Amy.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.